Excellent. We are in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 10. There is some controversy in this passage that I am going to skirt my way around and leave room to address that controversy at a later date if everybody is like, no, you really needed to address that controversy. Amanda who giggled then, yeah. All right. So we'll see if you can figure out what the controversy is. I'll start by reading it. The student, this is Matthew 10, verse 24. The student is not above the teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for students to be like their teachers and servants like their masters. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebub, how much more the members of his household? So do not be afraid of them. For there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. And what I tell you in the dark, speak in the daylight. What is whispered in your ear, proclaim from the roofs. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. Whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. Do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to turn a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies will be the members of his own household. Anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. Whoever finds their life will lose it, and whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. All right. Whole bunch of stuff that would have been easier for Christendom if they'd just been left out. So inconvenient. The student is not above the teacher. The first bit's pretty easy. Nor a servant above his master. It is enough for students to be like their teachers and servants like their masters. If the head of the house has been called Beelzebul, how much more the members of his household? Jesus is just simply saying, I'm like the master, I'm like the teacher, and they picked on me. They said that I am like a demon, and as a result, you should anticipate and expect that they will see you in the same light. Just as you've watched me do all this cool stuff and I got picked on, I now want you to go do all this cool stuff and you too will get picked on. Just as the master gets picked on, so does the servant. Pretty straightforward, that one. So, with that in mind, knowing that you are going to be picked on just like I was, Jesus says, do not be afraid of them. For there is nothing concealed that will not be disclosed, or hidden that will not be made known. This, do not be afraid. This is actually the single most repeated command in the entire Bible. Do not be afraid. It doesn't say stop sinning as the most repeated command. It doesn't say pray more. It says do not be afraid. Because your faithfulness and your loyalty, when you go out and do these things in my name, and they call you a devil just as they called me a devil, as you do all these things, as you face slander and accusation and harsh words and even violence, know that the truth will eventually come out. So you should be proclaiming it from the roofs. You shouldn't be worried, because the truth will vindicate you eventually. The truth that you are proclaiming will be known by all, and you will be shown to be right. So stay loyal and faithful. What I tell you in the dark, speak it in the daylight. And what is whispered in your ear, proclaim it from the roofs. Don't back off. Don't hide. Take these words I've shared with you and speak them loud. Do not be afraid of those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather be afraid of the one who can destroy both soul and body in hell. So here is our first challenging. There are two challenging bits in this passage. This is our first. And so this is where I'm going to somewhat skirt the issue. I'm not going to preach about hell today. I'm very happy to preach about hell. I have ideas and opinions about hell. I have read widely about hell. So I'm very happy to do a sermon about hell in the future. Today I will do it very briefly because we still need to address what it says to us in this particular passage. Some people have taken this and said, well, we should terrify people with hell so they'll follow Jesus. That's pretty common. It's the sinners in the hands of an angry God, Jonathan Edwards, who regretted that sermon because of how it was misconstrued and manipulated. And it became kind of like this beacon of his whole ministry, when in fact he had a lot to say about God's grace as well, but no one ever remembers that. I don't think that this is telling us that we should be terrified of God because he is going to destroy us in hell. I don't think it says that, because it very clearly says that in the next bit, that we should not be afraid of God because he gives a crap about two sparrows. He definitely cares about us. So the command where it says that we should not be afraid, and then it says we should be very afraid, and then immediately swings back to we should not be afraid. So there's something else going on here. There is something else going on here. I don't think this is talking about an eternal torment in hell. I think that people who always read eternal torment in hell when they find passages like this should keep reading a little bit more widely. I find myself saying this to students at school sometimes. I say, I could agree with you on this, but then we would both be wrong. This is not about people being tormented eternally in hell. Evangelicalism is guilty of condensing the three words that are often translated in English into the word hell, that is Sheol and Hades and Gehenna. They condense them into a single eschatological place of fiery eternal torment, which is more inspired by religious art and imagination than it is by a cultural and contextual understanding of what those words mean in a Jewish world influenced by Greco-Roman ideas. There is a lot more going on, and the word here is Gehenna. So amongst our words that are often translated as hell, I think that the translators in the NIV would have done better if we just left them with their original names so that they don't all get lumped together and they don't conjure particular imagery that we associate with those words. It would be better if they translated the words more literally or phonetically. The NIV has decided to translate the one here with a capitalized one. So the NIV translators are making a theological judgment that the one that is being spoken about here is God himself. But we don't see that in the Greek text. That is an assumption or a best interpretive effort on behalf of the NIV translators, but it is not one that is shared by all theologians. And so often when I hit a pickle like this, I will turn to people whose theological ideas I trust. And so when I turn to N.T. Wright, he interprets this slightly differently. Now, I will be honest with you, N.T. Wright's view is a minority view. Historically, this has been seen as you should be afraid of God because he's the one that can destroy your soul. That is how it's been interpreted largely throughout history. But also, as we discussed a month or two ago, history is largely shaped by patriarchal white men who have a particular view or slant of things. They come from their own cultural background as well. So just because it is the long-held historic view doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't investigate more closely. So I'm going to read, because I don't want to misrepresent N.T. Wright, I'm just going to read you what he says about this. He says, Jesus believed that Israel was faced in his day by enemies at two quite different levels. There were the obvious ones, Rome, Herod, and their underlings. They were the ones who had the power to kill the body, but there were other darker enemies who had the power to kill the soul as well. Enemies who were battling for the soul even now during Jesus' ministry and who were using the more obvious enemies as cover. Actually, it's even worse than that. The demonic powers that are greedy for the soul of God's people are using their very desire for justice and vengeance as the bait on the hook. The people of light are never more at risk than when they are lured into fighting the darkness with more darkness. That is the road straight to the smoldering rubbish tip, to Gehenna. And Jesus wants his followers to be well aware of it. This is what you should be afraid of. And so the word Gehenna is speaking of a valley alongside of Jerusalem, the valley of Hinnom, and that is a valley in which historically people who used to worship Moloch would offer child sacrifice through fire. It is a terrible, terrible place. And so Jerusalem, they would take the refuse from the city and they would burn it in the valley of Hinnom, also Gehenna. And so the imagery of fire comes from this idea of taking the trash out or from the offering of sacrifice to Moloch. But it was a literal place at a literal time. And Jesus, in essence, is saying, if you fight against Rome or against Herod, you will certainly have your body will be killed. But worse than that can happen if you get caught up in violence and vengeance. If you get caught up in this other war that is going on, you risk turning your life into trash. You risk having your very soul thrown into Gehenna. So it's not meant to be a commentary about an eternal place of destruction. And even if it was, the word destruction, I kind of betray myself, give away a bit of my views on hell here. It's finite. It's destroyed forever. It's not an ongoing fire. Otherwise, when you went to the Valley of Hinnom today, there would still be an ongoing fire. And there's not. There's a very beautiful park there now. You can go and walk in the Valley of Hinnom. You can go to hell right now, and it's delightful. But regardless of how we choose to interpret that, even if you do say, no, it's definitely God, he's the one that can destroy the soul, instead of seeing it more as a metaphoric thing, saying, don't lose your soul by doing this. I don't think Jesus is talking about an eternal place. He's talking about how they should live right now. Don't get caught up in that violence and retributive thing. Don't do it. Anyway, regardless of how you interpret that, even if you think it is God, or even if you think it's some other entity or power that can ruin your life, Jesus immediately then swings the pendulum back to don't be afraid. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Yet not one of them will fall to the ground outside your Father's care. And even the very hairs of your head are all numbered. So don't be afraid. You are worth more than many sparrows. See, even if it is God that you should be worried about, the one who can destroy both body and soul, you don't need to be worried. God is concerned about the smallest sparrows, the hairs on your head. We should not fear God. The lesson here is respect God, honor God, all those types of awe, fear perhaps, but we should not fear God that he will hurt us. We should trust God with our lives. We should trust God with our souls. We should trust God with our fears. And whoever acknowledges me before others, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. But whoever disowns me before others, I will disown before my Father in heaven. So now Jesus is beginning to ramp this up. He's using hyperbole here. He goes on and says, do not suppose that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword, which is our second complicating section. But swords are used to cut things in half. Swords are used to create division. He's saying, I haven't come just to smooth over all of this. I haven't come to put a stamp on the temple practices and the and Herod and Rome and all of the stuff that's going on. I haven't come to just be quiet. I've come to bring war against the nonsense. And I'm going to use a sword to cut that in half. I'm going to divide people. And then he continues in his hyperbole. I have come to turn man against his father A daughter against her mother, a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, a man enemies will be the members of his own household, which again sounds incredibly, powerfully harsh to us. But Jesus is actually quoting the prophet Micah. He's using a historic set of scriptures and imagery so that people can understand what he's saying, because the hyperbole there is that Micah, they were rejecting the work of God, and it's not a new phenomena. And so he's saying this has happened before. It happened before when all this mess happened, and mother and child and father and son there was division there. It's happened before. It's literally part of your history. And he's referencing that part of history, and he's saying this is how serious this is. When you go out and you preach my words and people hate you for it, and even when you in your own home, people hate you for it, even when you in your own family, people reject you for it, know that you will be vindicated. It's not a license to reject your family or not care for your elders. The Jewish culture and laws around caring for family and even foreigner, neighbor, and alien and sojourner were very significant and serious, and Jesus hasn't come to undermine the family. But he's trying to use this extreme example that is also rooted in their history to say people are going to be upset with you when you follow me. It's about the seriousness of our allegiance to Christ. When persecution comes, when trouble is brewing, when you are being slandered or pursued, even when your own family rises against you, will you remain faithful? And the quote from Micah is just saying this has happened before. The people of God have been split before. And anyone who loves their father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. Anyone who loves their son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. I think sometimes we forget the rhetoric. We forget the presentation. We forget the drama. Jesus is doing prophetic theater for people. And that includes extreme, bold statements. I'm sure that after this, if Jesus' mother was around, she would have gotten him into trouble. He wasn't married, so his wife couldn't tell him off for saying these extreme things. Well, I suspect that his followers were confused by him at times. And throughout history, people have read these words and not seen them as hyperbole. They've seen them as somehow a command to reject or walk away from family responsibility, and it doesn't mean that. Whoever does not take up their cross and follow me is not worthy of me. And whoever finds their life will lose it. And whoever loses their life for my sake will find it. Now we read these words, and in our very safe context, they don't hold the same meaning. But for the audience that Jesus is speaking to, I suspect that there were times when they would look back on this very extreme teaching, times when they were being literally pursued and literally persecuted, and at times killed, that they would have found comfort in these words. So instead of them just being a jarring kind of way for us to go, geez, that's a bit harsh, they would have said, I'm so glad that I knew this could happen, and I knew that I was not going to be abandoned, and I would be vindicated, and that I do not need to fear what will happen. When my body is killed, I don't need to worry about my soul, because God cares for the sparrow and he cares for me. And right now, in this terrible place of persecution, in this terrible place of challenge, I can remain faithful. Heavenly Father, I thank you that you go before us and set the ultimate example of literally bearing a cross. And I pray that we, in our very comfortable lives, that we would not back down from bearing that cross, even when it causes division in a workplace, even when it causes division in relationship, even when we are challenged, and even potentially in our families. I pray that we would not overdo this message to the point where we see it as a command to create division, but instead we would see it for what it is, as an encouragement to remain faithful against opposition. I pray that you would help us to not be afraid. And I pray in Jesus' name. Amen.